The ancient secret that destroys modern love. Epictetus, the most brutally honest philosopher in history, identified the fundamental flaw that causes most men to fail catastrophically in relationships. A psychological error so basic yet so devastating that it destroys love before it even begins. Born a slave who became one of history's greatest teachers of human psychology, Epictetus understood suffering, powerlessness, and the desperate human need for control in ways that modern relationship experts never could. His shocking insight wasn't about communication techniques or romantic strategies. It was about a fundamental misunderstanding of reality that makes authentic love impossible. Epictetus discovered that men fail in relationships because they try to control what cannot be controlled while neglecting to develop what is entirely within their power. This creates a toxic cycle where men become increasingly desperate, needy, and manipulative as their attempts to control outcomes inevitably fail, driving away the very love they're trying to secure. The brutal truth Epictetus revealed is that most men are psychologically unprepared for healthy relationships because they've never learned the difference between what they can and cannot control, making them emotional children disguised as adults. This ancient wisdom isn't just philosophical theory. It's the practical foundation for every successful relationship, and understanding it will transform how you approach love, attraction, and human connection. The devastating pattern Epictetus observed begins with what he called the illusion of control, men's unconscious belief that they can manipulate, convince, or force romantic outcomes through effort, strategy, or emotional pressure. This illusion creates relationships built on coercion rather than genuine attraction, where men exhaust themselves trying to make women feel certain ways, respond certain ways, or make certain decisions, rather than focusing on becoming the kind of men who naturally inspire those responses. Men trapped in this illusion approach relationships like business negotiations or military campaigns, believing that the right tactics, enough persistence, or sufficient investment will guarantee the outcomes they want. They study pickup techniques, memorize conversation strategies, analyze women's behavior for clues about how to manipulate their responses, and treat relationships as problems to be solved rather than connections to be cultivated through authentic personal development. This approach creates what Epictetus called external dependency, where men's emotional state, self-worth, and sense of success depend entirely on variables outside their control, whether women respond positively, whether relationships develop as hoped, whether partners remain faithful and committed. When men base their happiness on external outcomes, they become emotional hostages to circumstances they cannot control, creating the desperation and neediness that destroys attraction. Have you ever found yourself obsessing over a woman's responses, analyzing her texts for hidden meanings, or trying to figure out exactly what to say or do to make her feel attracted to you? Epictetus identified the first fatal error as outcome attachment, the tendency to invest emotional energy and self-worth in specific relationship results rather than in the process of becoming an attractive, complete individual. Men who suffer from outcome attachment approach dating and relationships with predetermined scripts about how things should unfold, becoming frustrated and desperate when reality doesn't match their expectations. This attachment manifests in countless destructive ways, pursuing women who clearly aren't interested because admitting rejection threatens their ego, staying in toxic relationships because leaving would mean admitting failure, or manipulating situations to create artificial intimacy rather than allowing genuine connection to develop naturally. Men with outcome attachment often interpret women's natural boundaries, independence, or complexity as obstacles to overcome, rather than as information about compatibility and mutual interest. The deeper problem with outcome attachment is that it prevents men from seeing relationships clearly because they're too invested in specific results to perceive what's actually happening. They miss obvious signs of incompatibility because acknowledging them would threaten their desired outcome. They ignore red flags because facing them would require abandoning their emotional investment. They persist in pursuing unavailable women because stopping would feel like personal failure rather than practical wisdom. Epictetus taught that outcome attachment creates what he called voluntary suffering, emotional pain that comes not from external circumstances, but from our resistance to reality. When men attach to specific relationship outcomes, they create internal conflict between what they want and what actually exists, guaranteeing frustration regardless of external circumstances. The second fatal error Epictetus identified is external validation dependency, seeking approval, affection, and self-worth from romantic partners rather than developing these internally. This dependency transforms relationships from partnerships between whole individuals into transactions where men trade behavior, resources, or emotional labor for validation and approval. Men trapped in validation dependency approach relationships as opportunities to prove their worth rather than to share their value. They constantly seek reassurance about their attractiveness, importance, or lovability, creating relationships that feel more like therapy sessions than romantic partnerships. They interpret partners' moods, responses, or level of enthusiasm as reflections of their own value, creating exhausting emotional volatility based on external factors. This dependency also prevents authentic intimacy because men are too focused on managing their partner's perceptions to be genuine themselves. They become actors playing roles they think will generate approval rather than expressing their authentic personality, preferences, and values. This performance creates relationships based on false premises that inevitably collapse when the real person emerges. Epictetus observed that validation dependency creates what he called the approval trap, a cycle where men become increasingly manipulative and inauthentic in their desperate attempts to maintain positive responses from partners. They learn to suppress authentic thoughts and feelings that might generate disapproval, while amplifying aspects of themselves that seem to generate positive reactions, gradually losing connection to their genuine identity. Can you think of times when you modified your behavior, opinions, or even personality to avoid conflict or maintain a woman's positive opinion of you, only to feel like you were losing yourself in the process? The third fatal error is emotional reactivity, allowing external circumstances, particularly partners' behavior and responses, to determine your emotional state and reactions rather than maintaining internal stability regardless of external conditions. Emotionally reactive men become emotional hostages to their relationships, experiencing extreme highs when things go well and devastating lows when things go poorly. This reactivity creates relationships that feel like emotional roller coasters, where both people are constantly responding to each other's moods and behaviors, rather than maintaining individual emotional stability. Men who are emotionally reactive often interpret normal relationship dynamics, disagreements, individual needs for space, natural fluctuations in intimacy, as crises requiring immediate action or as threats to the relationship's survival. Emotional reactivity also prevents effective communication and conflict resolution because reactive men are too emotionally destabilized to think clearly or respond wisely to relationship challenges. They make desperate decisions during emotional lows, say things they regret during emotional highs, and create additional problems through their inability to maintain emotional equilibrium. Epictetus taught that emotional reactivity represents a fundamental misunderstanding of where emotions come from. Most men believe their emotions are caused by external events, their partner's behavior, relationship outcomes, romantic circumstances. But Epictetus revealed that emotions come from our judgments about events, not from the events themselves. This means emotional stability is always within your control if you learn to manage your interpretations and responses. The fourth fatal error Epictetus identified is the neglect of self-development, focusing so much energy on acquiring and maintaining relationships that men neglect the inner work necessary to become genuinely attractive, emotionally mature, and psychologically complete individuals. This neglect creates men who are desperate for relationships because they haven't developed the internal resources necessary for fulfillment and happiness. Men who neglect self-development often use relationships as substitutes for the personal growth, creative expression, meaningful work, and spiritual development that create genuine satisfaction and self-respect. They seek partners to provide meaning, purpose, and fulfillment that they should be generating from their own character and achievements, creating relationships based on neediness rather than abundance. This neglect also prevents men from developing the attractive qualities, confidence, emotional stability, clear purpose, interesting perspective that naturally draw healthy women into their lives. Instead of becoming irresistibly attractive through personal development, they try to compensate for their lack of development through manipulation, persistence, or external achievements, that don't address the underlying psychological immaturity. Epictetus emphasized that self-development isn't selfish. It's the foundation for healthy relationships, because only psychologically complete individuals can contribute to partnership rather than seeking it for psychological completion. Men who develop themselves first create relationships from abundance rather than neediness, choice rather than desperation, and strength rather than weakness. Have you noticed that your most successful periods with women coincided with times when you were focused on your own growth and goals rather than on finding or maintaining relationships? Epictetus's solution to these relationship failures involves what he called the discipline of desire and aversion, learning to want what is achievable through your own efforts while becoming emotionally indifferent to outcomes that depend on factors outside your control. This doesn't mean not caring about relationships. It means caring about them in a way that enhances rather than undermines your effectiveness and attractiveness. The first component of Epictetus' method is radical acceptance of what you cannot control, fully acknowledging that other people's feelings, decisions, and responses are entirely outside your influence, and that attempting to control them will only create suffering and ineffectiveness. This acceptance frees enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy currently wasted on futile attempts at control. Radical acceptance means releasing attachment to specific relationship outcomes while maintaining commitment to your own growth and authentic expression. It means accepting that some women won't be interested in you, some relationships won't work out, and some romantic situations won't develop as you hope, and recognizing that this reality doesn't reflect your worth or potential for future happiness. This acceptance also means stopping all attempts to manipulate, convince, or pressure women into feeling or responding certain ways. Instead of trying to make women like you focus on becoming genuinely likable. Instead of trying to create artificial intimacy, you develop the authentic attractiveness that inspires natural intimacy. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to learn the Stoic principles that create genuine confidence and attract healthy relationships through personal development rather than manipulation. Like this video if you recognize these relationship patterns and want to understand how ancient wisdom can transform your approach to love and attraction. Share this content with someone who's ready to stop chasing outcomes and start developing the inner strength that naturally draws authentic connection. The second component is complete responsibility for what you can control, taking full ownership of your character development, emotional state, physical health, life purpose, and the energy you bring to every interaction. This responsibility shifts focus from trying to control others to developing the qualities that make you naturally attractive and relationship ready. Taking complete responsibility means recognizing that your attractiveness, happiness, and relationship success depend entirely on factors within your control: your physical fitness, emotional maturity, intellectual development, social skills, life purpose, and character strength. When you focus completely on developing these areas, you become naturally attractive without needing to manipulate or pressure anyone. This responsibility also includes managing your emotional responses to relationship challenges, maintaining your goals and interests regardless of relationship status, and bringing positive energy to interactions rather than seeking energy from others. You become someone who enhances others' lives rather than someone who needs others to enhance yours. Epictetus taught that complete responsibility for controllable factors creates what he called unconditional confidence, self-assurance that doesn't depend on external validation or specific outcomes because it's based on your commitment to continuous improvement and authentic self-expression rather than on others' responses. The third component of Epictetus's method is emotional independence and stability, developing the capacity to maintain inner peace, clarity, and positive energy regardless of external relationship circumstances. This doesn't mean emotional numbness. It means emotional maturity that allows you to feel deeply without being controlled by your feelings. Emotional independence involves learning to generate your own happiness, motivation, and sense of worth rather than depending on romantic partners to provide these psychological necessities. It means developing internal sources of fulfillment through meaningful work, creative expression, physical achievement, and spiritual growth that make relationships optional rather than necessary for psychological survival. This independence also includes learning to process emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them, to face relationship challenges without losing your center, and to maintain your values and boundaries even when they create temporary conflict or disappointment. You become emotionally reliable for yourself and others rather than emotionally dependent. Emotional stability creates what Epictetus called attractive strength, the magnetic quality that draws healthy people toward you because they sense that you're psychologically complete and capable of genuine partnership rather than seeking psychological rescue or completion through relationship. The fourth component is authentic self-expression and value creation, focusing your energy on expressing your genuine personality, pursuing meaningful goals, and contributing value to the world rather than on acquiring romantic validation or managing others' perceptions of you. This creates relationships based on genuine attraction to who you actually are, rather than to the performance you think others want to see. Authentic self-expression means having the courage to be yourself, even when it risks disapproval, to express your genuine thoughts and feelings, even when they create conflict, and to pursue your authentic interests and goals, even when they don't fit others' expectations. This authenticity attracts people who appreciate your real personality, while repelling those who would only like a false version of yourself. Value creation involves developing skills, pursuing meaningful work, building something worthwhile, and contributing to others' lives in ways that create genuine self-respect and external recognition. When you're focused on creating value, relationships become opportunities to share your abundance, rather than transactions to acquire what you're missing. Epictetus taught that authentic self-expression, combined with genuine value creation, makes you naturally attractive without effort or strategy, because you become someone worth knowing, worth being around, and worth building a life with. This attraction is sustainable because it's based on your actual character and capabilities, rather than on performance or manipulation. The transformation that results from applying Epictetus's principles often surprises men because it happens from the inside out rather than through external techniques. They discover that when they stop trying to control relationship outcomes and start developing themselves completely, they naturally become more attractive, more confident, and more successful in relationships because they're approaching them from strength rather than neediness. Men who embrace Epictetus's approach often find that their relationship problems solve themselves as they develop the emotional maturity, authentic confidence, and psychological independence that healthy women find irresistible. They attract better quality partners because they become better quality men, and they maintain healthier relationships because they're contributing from abundance rather than seeking from desperation. The broader implications of Epictetus' relationship wisdom extend far beyond romantic success into every area of life where you interact with other people. The same principles that create healthy romantic relationships also create better friendships, more effective professional relationships, and more fulfilling family dynamics because they're based on universal truths about human psychology and emotional maturity. Your recognition of these relationship patterns represents the beginning of potential transformation from reactive desperation to proactive strength. Epictetus's principles provide a clear path from relationship failure to relationship success through the development of psychological maturity that makes you naturally attractive rather than desperately needy. The ultimate insight from Epictetus's brutal truth is that relationship success isn't about finding the right techniques to control others, but about developing the character that naturally inspires others to want to be around you. This ancient wisdom remains as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago because human psychology and the foundations of attraction haven't changed, only our understanding of how to develop and apply them.